So this week and next will be some of the heaviest lifting, I think, in this class that we're going to do. Some of the most technical stuff is this week and next. Some of the stuff I'll ask you about on the midterm exam is what we're covering this week and next. So I apologize if this seems dry, if this is very reminiscent of stuff you may have gone over in your philosophy class. But I'm just trying to lay out the background of classical theism. I want to make sure we're all on the same page when we discuss some of the basic presuppositions of classical theism in theology. So, one of the big issues that classical theologians first encountered a really long time ago, by the way. I've done quite a bit of research on how this debate played out in the 13th century. Classical theistic theologians in the Jewish, Christian, Muslim traditions were very concerned about the meaning of the statement, God exists. What does the statement, God exists, mean? Now, why is this even a problem? Well, let me try to show you why it's a problem. Let's compare. First of all, it's something that every theist should be able to say, you would think. If you go to church on Sunday and recite the creed, the first thing you say is, I believe in God. Well, what does that even mean, I believe in God? What does it mean to say, God exists? Well, to see the problem, let's compare it to other statements of the form something exists. What do you want to put in the blank? What would you like to put in there? Happy students. Happy students exist. What does this mean? This means that when you count the students, when you start looking at the students, you will find that some of the students, at least one of the students, is happy. When we say happy students exist, we mean there's at least one student who's happy. Now, a few years ago, my friend Vance, it's a really weird story what happened. He came into a bunch of money. He won the lottery. And he lost it all very quickly. What did Vance do? He decided to buy a boat and charter a crew and buy all kinds of expensive equipment. And he went to the Loch Ness in Scotland to look for the Loch Ness Monster. He wanted to know whether this statement is true. Vance wanted to know whether it was true that the Loch Ness Monster existed. Well, what does it even mean to say the Loch Ness Monster exists? Let me suggest to you that when Vance went to Scotland, and he took the boat and the crew, the sonar equipment, the computers, all kinds of fancy measuring devices, there's one more thing Vance had to take with him if he was going to discover whether or not the Loch Ness Monster existed. What's the one other thing Vance needed, other than equipment and crews and all that? Up here. He needed an idea of what the Loch Ness Monster is. He needed an idea of what that word means, the Loch Ness Monster. Because the statement, the Loch Ness Monster exists, to determine whether it's true or not, we need to know what it is we're talking about. Because the statement means something like this. Once you've counted up everything in the universe, once you've taken the final inventory of everything, the ultimate list of all that there is, somewhere on the list you will find something that corresponds to a large amphibian beast that lives in the Loch Ness in Scotland that's been previously uncategorized by science. That's what the statement the Loch Ness Monster exists means. It means that when you count up everything that there is in the universe, one of the items will be the giant, uncategorized beast living in the Loch Ness in Scotland. And to determine whether it's true or not, you need to know what the Loch Ness Monster, you need to know what that phrase refers to. How about if I say leprechauns exist? What does it mean to say leprechauns exist? It means once you've made the final inventory of everything in the universe, the ultimate list of everything that there is, somewhere on that list, along with kitty cats and doggy dogs and happy students, you will find something like little Irishmen hoarding gold at the other side of the rainbow. That's what the statement leprechauns exist means. I'll do one more for you. What does it mean if I say kitty cats exist? Kitty cats exist. What does the statement kitty cats exist mean? By the way, don't overthink this. All I'm doing right now is explaining how the English language works. Nothing I've said so far should be like a real eureka moment. Okay? If I'm explaining to somebody who's maybe learning English what the statement kitty cats exist means, how do I cash that statement out? That statement gets cashed out this way. When you make the list of everything in the universe, the final inventory of everything, somewhere on the list, you will find the animal that goes meow, 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 purr, purr, purr. That's all that statement means. Kitty cats exist just means that one of the things in the universe, at least one of the things in the universe, is an animal going meow, 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 and purr, purr, purr. So notice in all of these examples, we have an idea of the thing we're trying to talk about, whether that thing be leprechauns or Loch Ness monsters or happy students or kitty cats. And we're simply asking whether there's anything in the universe corresponding to that idea. I'll say it again. Existential statements, that is to say statements of the form blank exists, purport to tell us that there's at least one thing in the universe corresponding to the idea of the thing whose existence is being asserted. Very simple. Very, very simple. So far, all I've done is told you how English works. Now, let's get theological. What happens when we put God in the blank? Well, let me tell you some of the problems we run up against real quick. One problem, first of all, you don't have an idea of God, according to classical theism. God is infinite, and you can't have an idea of the infinite. So, when I want to know if the statement Loch Ness Monster exists is true, I have to have an idea of what the Loch Ness Monster is. But I have no idea of what God is. Now, let me show you an even more serious problem. Let me show you something that's going to make our task even more difficult. Whatever God is, God should be the proper object of worship. What is it when you worship one of the things in the universe? Do we have a word for that? Worshipping one of the things in the universe? We do. In theology, we call that idolatry. Idolatry is when you worship something other than God, i.e., if you worship one of the things in the universe, that's a form of idolatry. Okay. Well, that means God can't be one of the things in the universe. Are you following me? Well, if God can't be one of the things in the universe, then what can the statement God exists mean? It can't mean that among the things in the universe, on the list of all the stuff, on the giant inventory, there's something corresponding to our idea of God. No! A, you don't have an idea of God. B, whatever God is, it can't be one of the things on the list. Now, now we're somewhere. Now we've got a problem. I believe in God, says the Christian, the Jew, and the Muslim. But, says the classical theist, says every Jew, Christian, and Muslim for several thousand years, God's not one of the things. God is not one of the things. I believe in God. God's not one of the things. It's really, really hard. Really, really hard to make those two ideas go together. That God's not one of the things and God exists. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? I think I have a solution. You ready? Here it goes. I am going to distinguish between deep grammar and surface grammar. I told you today's lecture was going to be the trickiest. One of the trickiest. This week and next week are tricky. Let's distinguish deep grammar from surface grammar. I'm going to tell you what these fancy words mean. Then I'm going to show you how they can help us solve the problem that I raised earlier. What's the problem I raised earlier? Can you tell me? If I were to stop the video right now, could you tell me what the problem is, the theological problem that I'm trying to answer is? Can you? Okay, I'll say it again. I'll say it again. How can I make sense of the statement, God exists, if God's not one of the things? That's the problem. And if you don't understand why that's a problem, start the video back at the beginning. Okay, you're not going to understand anything I say from this point on if you don't understand the problem. You're wasting your time if you're still watching this video and you don't understand how that problem arose. Okay, existential statements are statements that purport to tell us about the things in the universe. What things are and are not. But God can't be one of the things. Why? Because we can't worship one of the things. That's idolatry. So, what can the statement God exists means if it doesn't mean God's one of the things? Now I shall solve the problem. All statements have surface grammar. Surface grammar is the grammar you learned in school. Surface grammar is the grammar you learned in school. It's how you diagram a sentence. So, let's consider a sentence. Scarlett Johansson had a bagel for breakfast. SJ. Doesn't mean she's a Jesuit. It stands for Scarlett Johansson. Now, the surface grammar of the statement. The surface grammar of the statement is very straightforward. Subject, Scarlett Johansson. Predicate, had a bagel for breakfast. You know that already, don't you? Good, good. Now, that's the surface grammar, but let's think a little bit about what the statement means. When you start cashing out a statement, that's how you discover what we call its deep grammar. So here's what I mean. The statement, Scarlett Johansson had a bagel for breakfast, if I cash it out, what's it saying? It's saying that there's a woman, her name is Scarlett, And this morning, for her first meal, she had a bagel. That's all it means. So I've given you the surface grammar. The surface grammar is subject plus the predicate, had a bagel for breakfast. Deep grammar is there's a woman named Scarlett, and that's what she had. Let's look at a statement with the same surface grammar, but different deep grammar. The average LMU student had a bagel for breakfast. The average LMU student had a bagel for breakfast. The same surface grammar as our other statement. There's a subject. Just instead of Scarlett Johansson, we replaced it with the average LMU student. And the same exact predicate. Had a bagel for breakfast. Now, do these statements have the same deep grammar? What was the deep grammar of Scarlett Johansson had a bagel? That meant that there's a woman somewhere named Scarlett, and that's what she had. The average LMU student. Who's that? Who is it? What's his name? What's her name? How tall? I can tell you how tall Scarlett Johansson is. I think she's 5'9". But how tall is this person? Oh, this doesn't pick out a person. This statement doesn't pick out a person. This statement doesn't pick out a person. That should be obvious. This statement doesn't pick out a person. This one does. Who's it pick out? Scarlett Johansson. She's 5'9". She lives in Manhattan. And she's beautiful. The average LMU student had a bagel for breakfast. Where's that person live? How tall? Is it a he or a she? Are they beautiful? Of course. So, let me give you another example. The way to understand the difference between surface grammar and deep grammar is by way of examples. Surface grammar is just the grammar you learned in school. Deep grammar, we only talk about deep grammar, by the way, when two statements have the same surface grammar. Once we see two statements with the same surface grammar, we can say, do they have the same deep grammar? I have a key in my pocket. Here's a famous example. I have a key in my pocket. What does it mean? It means that in the pants that I'm wearing or in something I'm wearing, if you were to go in there, you would find a key. That's what it means. You could take it out. You could look at it if you wanted. I have a pain in my ass. My roommate's always being a pain in the ass. My cat's a pain in my ass too. I have a pain in my ass. Same surface grammar. I have a blank in my blank. Same surface grammar. You would diagram those sentences basically the same. The deep grammar, very different. Don't go into my ass looking for a piece of pain that you can measure. Please don't do that. I have a pain in my ass. What's that mean? It means I'm annoyed. I'm frustrated. Someone's getting on my nerves. Okay. Surface grammar versus deep grammar. Hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. God exists has the same surface grammar as lots of other statements. It has, for example, the same surface grammar as theologians exist. But I want to suggest it as different deep grammar. The deep grammar of theologians exist means that when you count up all the stuff, you'll find on the list somebody who thinks about theology. Deep grammar of God exists. I'm going to suggest to you that deep grammar of God exists is actually a statement not about God, but about the universe. The statement God exists tells us that the universe presents a mystery. The universe presents a mystery. And I shall now give you the slogan you must memorize. You must memorize this slogan if you want to understand the theology of classical theism. For the classical theist, the statement God exists means there are features of the universe which ought to be causally accounted for, but which cannot be causally accounted for by other features of the universe. It's a big phrase. I'll put it on the board. There are features of the universe which ought to be causally accounted for, but which cannot be causally accounted for by other features of the universe. If that turns out to be true, then the classical theist believes we can affirm God exists. And we can even say that God is what's responsible for those features of the universe, which ought to be causally accounted for, but which cannot be causally accounted for by other features of the universe. You want me to break it down? I'll break it down. Here's a feature of the universe. I'm gaining weight. I'm gaining weight. I've been gaining weight recently. Sad, I know. Well, that's a feature of the universe. Now, should it be causally accounted for? Yes. Okay, if somebody said to me, why are you gaining weight? Why has your weight been going up? And I just said, that happens. Strange world we live in where things just happen without account, no cause at all. No, that's not how anything works at all. Right? We look for an account of why I'm gaining weight. And lo and behold, that feature of the universe, my gaining weight, can be causally accounted for by another feature of the universe, namely my diet and exercise habits. Right? I can explain my weight gain, my weight loss in terms of my diet and exercise habits. I've been consuming more calories than I've been burning. That's all there is to it. Okay, well, are there features of the universe which ought to be causally accounted for, but which cannot be causally accounted for by other features of the universe? Classical theists often say yes. Often. There's a few exceptions, but change. Okay, me gaining weight or me losing weight, that's a change. And when something's changing, you expect an explanation. You look for a cause of change. If you get home from work or school and your little brother or sister is sitting watching reruns of Friends while the kitchen is on fire, and you say to your little brother or sister, why is the kitchen on fire? And they say, I don't know. It just is. Shut up. It just is? No. That's not how things work. We don't say it just is. We look for a cause of the fire. Well, guess what? The whole universe is changing. The whole material world is constantly undergoing change. Why? What's causing that? Guess what? You can't point at any of the changing things as an explanation, right? If you want to answer the question, why change, you can't point at something undergoing change, because then you fail to raise the question. There has to be an unchanging source of change. So God, for the classical theist, is the unchanged, God never changes, source of all change. This just means that the question, why change, is a legitimate question. Okay, let me emphasize this, that for the classical theist, to affirm that God exists, which is to affirm that there are features of the universe which ought to be causally accounted for, but which cannot be causally accounted for by other features of the universe, to affirm that that's true is to affirm the legitimacy of certain questions. Like the question, why change? Not why this change, not why this particular change. If you want to know why the leaves are changing color, you study biology. You study leaves, you study trees. But why any change at all? Why any change at all? If that's a legitimate question, then you can be considered a theist if you believe that's a legitimate question. You're a theist. The classical theist doesn't try to answer the question. I do not pretend to have an answer to the question, why change? I'm giving the answer a name, I'm calling it God, but I'm not pretending to know what God is, only what God is not. God is not something that undergoes change. So, I think that's enough for us to think about today. Read the McCabe essay, McCabe's Cosmological Argument, and we'll see why McCabe thinks we can affirm the existence of God. See you next time.